Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
This time we're diving into a recent sermon all about prayer
Oh, yeah.
from Pastor Mark.
Interesting.
He had some really fascinating insights into prayer and how it connects to blessings in our lives.
I think we often think of prayer as like a last resort.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
When we're desperate,
Right. Or in trouble or in need.
when all else fails.
Yeah. Or when we need something.
Right.
But Pastor Mark suggests it's actually, it's more than that. It's like this secret key to
Oh,
unlock blessings in our everyday lives.
I like that. A secret key.
Yeah. And what's really cool is he reveals 3 of these secrets,
Okay.
and they're all hidden within the Lord's Prayer.
That's a great framework. The Lord's Prayer, I feel like we all know it,
Yeah.
but I know if we always stop and think about it,
Absolutely.
about what it really means.
It's so familiar, but it holds so much depth.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how Pastor Mark kind of teases those secrets out of this prayer that
Yeah.
we say so often.
Yeah.
So let's dive into secret number 1,
Okay.
seeking God's kingdom.
Right.
What really struck me here was his emphasis on how it's not about getting God to bless our plans,
Right.
but about aligning ourselves with his plan.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not about bending God to our will.
Exactly.
It's about surrendering to his
Yes.
to his bigger picture.
Absolutely. It's a
Yeah.
total shift in perspective.
It is.
It's like instead of saying, God bless my plans,
Yeah.
it's more like, God, what are your plans and how can I be a part of them?
I love that. It reminds me of, you know how we talk about putting God first in a relationship?
Uh-huh.
You can't have a healthy marriage
Right.
if both people aren't prioritizing the relationship above their own
Yes.
individual desires.
Absolutely. And I think that analogy is so powerful
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's not just about like, our romantic relationships,
Yeah.
but it's about our relationship with God
Right.
and recognizing that, just like in a marriage.
We need open communication.
We do.
Seeking God's kingdom involves actively seeking his guidance, seeking his will,
His will.
and being open to it.
And I love how Pastor Mark gets really specific too. He talks about these 5 areas
Oh, yeah.
where we can invite God in.
Yes. And this was really
Yeah.
practical.
Yeah, what are they?
Okay, so we've got finances, interests, relationships,
Okay.
schedules, and even our troubles.
Wow. So it's not just the good stuff.
No,
He's saying God wants to be a part of it all.
absolutely. He wants to be involved in every aspect.
Every aspect.
It's recognizing that he cares about the big things and the small things.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And, speaking of that whole idea of trust,
Okay.
that leads us right into secret number 2,
Okay.
depending on God's power.
Ooh, I like this one.
This one, I have to say, felt a little counterintuitive to me at first
How so?
because it's the idea that God doesn't bless the self-sufficient.
Oh.
He blesses those who recognize their need for him.
So it's like that
Yeah.
paradox of faith where true strength comes from acknowledging our
Yes.
weakness.
Exactly. And being willing to say, I can't do this on my own. And Pastor Mark used the story of Abraham
Well, yeah.
to illustrate this.
Powerful story.
And it really got me thinking because, Abraham was willing to sacrifice everything, even his son,
Yeah.
because of his unwavering faith.
Yeah. It's a powerful testament to the transformative power of faith.
Yes.
Like he was willing to step outside his comfort zone
Yeah.
to face the unknown
Right.
because he trusted in God's ultimate plan.
Yes. And it makes me think, sometimes God allows us to go through those challenges, to
Yeah.
be in those situations where we feel like we're in over our heads.
Yeah.
And it's like we have no choice but to lean on him.
And those challenges become opportunities for growth,
Absolutely.
for our faith to be stretched and strengthened.
Yes.
Like in those moments of vulnerability that
Yeah.
we really experience
Yes.
the depth of God's power.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt that way?
Oh, yeah, totally. I remember there was this time when I was leading this major project at work,
Uh-huh.
and it was way beyond my experience level. I felt totally out of my depth.
I bet that was stressful.
Oh, it was so stressful. But, I remember praying constantly, just asking God for wisdom and guidance.
Yeah.
And somehow things just fell into place.
Wow.
And it wasn't about my abilities. It was about surrendering to God's leading.
It's about his provision.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And trusting that he would equip me.
That's beautiful. It's like he works through our weaknesses.
Absolutely. He doesn't call us to be perfect. He
Right.
calls us to be dependent. That's so good.
Yeah.
And speaking of purpose,
Okay.
that brings us to secret number 3,
All right.
living for his glory.
Ooh, This is a good one.
This one really made me think about who gets the credit in my life. Am I doing things for my own recognition or for something bigger?
That's a powerful question.
Yeah. And what does it actually look like to live for God's glory?
Well, I think it's about shifting our focus
Okay.
from self-promotion to service.
Mm-hmm.
It's about using our gifts and talents to make a difference in the world.
To make a positive impact.
Yeah.
And Pastor Mark actually gave some really specific examples of what that could look like.
Okay, what were some of them?
So he talked about supporting fellow believers
Okay.
and sharing the good news with those who haven't yet experienced God's love.
It's about being a vessel
Yes.
for God's love.
Exactly. And what I found fascinating was this idea that the more we bless others,
Yeah.
the more God blesses us.
It's a beautiful reciprocal
It is.
relationship.
There's this beautiful cyclical nature to it.
There is. It speaks to the abundance of God's grace.
Absolutely.
It's not a finite resource.
It multiplies.
It multiplies as we share it.
So we've got these 3 secrets.
Yeah.
Seeking God's kingdom, depending on his power, living for his glory. And they're all interconnected.
They are.
But how do we practically weave these principles into our daily lives?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Right into those 5 areas that we talked about.
Uh-huh.
Finances, interests, relationships, schedules, and even our troubles.
That's what we'll explore in part 2 of this deep dive. You know, as we think about this idea of weaving these secrets into our lives,
Yeah.
it strikes me that it all comes down to like a fundamental shift in perspective.
Oh, I'm curious to hear more about that. What kind of shift are you talking about?
Well, we often approach life
Uh-huh.
and even prayer with this me-centered mindset.
Okay.
Our focus is on what we want,
Yeah.
what we need,
Right.
what we think is best. But seeking God's kingdom
Yeah.
requires us to flip the script.
So instead of saying, God bless my plans,
Right.
it's more like, God, what are your plans?
It's not.
And how can I be a part of them?
It's about surrendering our will to His will,
Yeah.
trusting that His plans are infinitely better than our own,
Even if we don't understand them.
even if we don't understand them in the moment.
Absolutely. And it takes a lot of humility to
does.
admit that,
Yeah.
we don't always know what's best.
Right.
And that kind of makes me think about the second secret.
Okay.
Depending on God's power,
Uh-huh.
it's easy to say we trust God.
Yeah.
But when we're in the middle of a crisis,
Oh, yeah.
it's a whole different story.
Absolutely. Doubt and fear
Yeah,
can creep in so easily,
they do.
especially when we feel like
Like we're in over our heads.
we're in over our heads.
And it's so tempting to try to fix things ourselves,
It is.
to rely on our own
Yeah.
strength, our own ingenuity.
Right. It's like we want to take control.
We want to be in control.
But that's where the real growth happens.
Okay.
When we come to the end of ourselves and we acknowledge our need for God.
That's so good.
And, Pastor Mark emphasized this.
Yeah,
God isn't looking for perfect,
right.
self-sufficient people.
He wants us to come to him with our weaknesses,
Yes. With our doubts,
with our fears.
our fears. It's in those moments of vulnerability
Yes.
that His power is made perfect.
It reminds me of that verse in 2 Corinthians
Oh, yeah.
where Paul says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And it's like admitting we can't do it all on our own actually opens us up
Yeah.
to experiencing God's power more fully.
More fully. And that power isn't just for some elite group of super spiritual people.
Yeah.
It's available to all of us.
Regardless of our background,
Yes. Our past mistakes.
our current circumstances.
Exactly.
So it's really about that posture of humility,
Humility.
recognizing that we need God's help
We do.
to navigate this
Yeah.
crazy thing called life.
This journey.
Yeah. So we're seeking God's kingdom. We're surrendering to his will.
Surrender.
We're depending on his power. How does that then translate into that third secret, living for his glory?
Ooh, good question.
What does that actually look like? Yeah,
Practically? I mean,
Yeah.
it's easy to get caught up in the busyness of life
it is
and forget about the bigger picture.
a bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do we live for his glory?
I think living for God's glory is about aligning our actions, our motivations with His purposes.
Okay.
It's about using our gifts, our talents, our resources to serve others, to make a positive impact on the world around us.
So it's not just about what we do,
Right.
but why we do it.
Exactly.
Making sure that our actions are motivated by a desire to honor God
To honor God.
and point others towards him.
And I love this idea that,
Yeah.
we're not the stars of our own show.
That's so
We're
good.
supporting actors in God's grand narrative.
Yeah.
And our purpose is to shine a light on him,
Not ourselves.
not ourselves.
It's a humbling
It is.
yet liberating perspective.
It is. And as we embrace this posture
Yeah.
of seeking his kingdom depending on his power,
Mm.
living for his glory,
Mm.
we begin to experience those abundant blessings
Mm.
that Pastor Mark talked about.
Yeah. And it's not about earning those blessings. It's about aligning ourselves with God's heart.
With his purposes.
What is his purposes?
And that alignment can be seen in those 5 areas that we keep talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Finances, interests, relationships, schedules, and even our troubles.
Yes.
Each of these areas
Yeah.
becomes this canvas
Mhm.
for expressing our faith,
That's beautiful.
for demonstrating our dependence on God,
Yeah.
and for reflecting his glory to the world around us.
So how do we practically
Yeah.
invite God into each of those areas?
Yeah.
How do we seek his kingdom, depend on his power, and live for his glory in the midst of everyday life?
Let's dive into that in part 3.
Okay, so let's get practical.
Yeah, let's do it.
We've been talking about these 3 secrets to experiencing God's blessings,
Right.
seeking his kingdom, depending on his power, and living for his glory.
Mm.
But how do those principles actually play out in those 5 specific areas
Right.
that Pastor Mark mentioned?
Okay.
Finances, interests, relationships, schedules, and troubles.
It's helpful to remember that each of those areas
Yeah.
kind of presents this unique opportunity to live out our faith.
Right.
It's not about following a set of rules.
Uh-huh.
It's about cultivating this posture
Okay.
of surrender
Yeah.
and seeking God's guidance in every aspect of our lives.
I like that. So let's start with finances.
Okay?
This is a big one for a lot of people.
It is,
It's easy to get caught up
Yeah.
in the pursuit of financial security.
especially in today's world.
Yeah. So how do we practically put God first when it comes to money?
I think it starts with a shift in perspective.
Okay.
Instead of viewing money as something we own,
Uh-huh.
we can view it as a resource that God has entrusted to us.
Mm.
We're stewards,
Right.
called to manage our finances wisely and generously.
So it's not just about how much we give,
Right.
but about the heart behind our giving.
Exactly. Giving cheerfully, sacrificially, without expecting anything in return.
Mm.
That's a powerful way to honor God with our finances.
And I imagine it takes a lot of trust, too.
It does.
Trusting that God will provide for our needs even when we're being generous with what we have.
Remember the story of the widow who gave her last 2 mites?
Oh, yeah.
Jesus commended her,
Mm-hmm.
not for the amount,
Right.
but for the spirit of her giving.
Yeah.
She gave out of her poverty, trusting that God would meet her needs.
That's such a powerful reminder
It is.
that it's not about the size of our gift, but the posture of our heart.
And sometimes putting God first in our finances
Yeah.
means making tough choices.
Hmm.
It might mean saying no to certain purchases or investments
Right.
that don't align with God's values,
Even if they seem financially advantageous.
even if they seem like a good idea at the time.
It's about prioritizing what truly matters
Yes.
and seeking God's kingdom above our own material comfort.
All right, let's move on to interests.
Okay.
This one feels a bit more personal.
Yeah, it does.
What does it look like to put God first
Mm.
in our hobbies, our passions, the things we enjoy doing?
Yeah. You know, we often think of those things as separate from our faith,
We do.
but Pastor Mark seemed to suggest that even our leisure activities
Mhm.
can be opportunities to honor God.
Yeah, it's about asking ourselves,
Okay.
do my interests draw me closer to God
Mm.
or pull me further away?
Okay.
Do they align with his values and his purposes for my life?
So it's not about giving up everything we enjoy,
Hey.
but about making sure our interests are in harmony with our faith.
And sometimes it might mean letting go of certain hobbies
Yeah.
that are hindering our spiritual growth
Mm.
or taking up too much of our time and energy.
Okay.
Or it might mean finding ways to incorporate our faith into our interests,
Ooh, I like that.
using our passions to serve others or to glorify God.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
Okay, let's talk about relationships.
Okay, big topic.
Yeah, we've touched on this a bit already.
Yeah.
But how can we specifically prioritize God in our relationships with friends, family, significant others?
I think it starts with recognizing that every relationship is a gift from God
Mm.
and an opportunity to reflect his love.
Yeah.
It's about treating others with kindness, compassion, respect,
Even when it's difficult.
even when it's difficult.
Yes.
It's about letting God's love flow through us to those around us.
Even when they're not easy to love.
Even when they're not easy to love.
And I imagine that takes a lot of humility, too.
It does.
Admitting when we're wrong, asking for forgiveness, extending grace.
Extending grace to those who have hurt us.
It's about reflecting that unconditional love that God has shown us.
And it takes a lot of discernment, too.
It does.
Knowing when to speak up and when to hold back.
Yeah.
When to offer advice and when to simply listen.
Sometimes putting God first in our relationships means setting healthy boundaries, even with those we love the most.
It's about making choices that honor God and protect our hearts.
Even if those choices are difficult.
Even if they're hard.
It's a good reminder that loving someone doesn't mean enabling unhealthy behaviors.
Right.
Or compromising our values.
Or compromising our values.
Okay, let's move on to schedules.
Okay, we're all busy.
We are so busy.
Juggling work, family, social commitments.
All the things.
How do we make time for God amidst the chaos?
It feels impossible sometimes.
It does. But I think it comes down to prioritizing our relationship with God, just like we prioritize any other important relationship.
Okay.
It's about making those quiet times with God non-negotiable.
So it's like putting it in our calendars.
Yes, putting it in our calendars.
Like we would any other important appointment.
Like a date night with God.
I love that. And that might mean saying no to certain commitments.
In my
Activities that are crowding out our time with God.
Being intentional with our time and energy.
Yeah, making sure that our relationship with God is at the top of our priority list.
Right. And finally, let's talk about troubles.
Okay, this one feels a bit different.
It does. How do we put God first when we're going through tough times?
Yeah, when we're facing challenges or experiencing pain.
I think it's about remembering that God is with us in the midst of our struggles.
Yeah.
He's not distant or indifferent to our pain.
He sees us.
He sees us. He's a God of comfort and compassion.
And he wants us to turn to him.
He wants us to turn to him in our times of need.
So it's about bringing our worries, our fears, our anxieties to him in prayer.
Yes. Seeking his guidance, his comfort, his strength.
And sometimes putting God first in our troubles means choosing to trust him. Even when we don't understand what's happening.
Even when it feels like he's silent.
Even when we can't see the bigger picture.
Holding on to that belief that he's working all things together for our good.
It's a reminder that our faith isn't dependent on our circumstances.
That's good.
It's about trusting in God's goodness and faithfulness, even in the midst of difficult times.
And sometimes those difficult times become the catalyst for our greatest growth.
That's so true.
It's in the valleys that we learn to lean on God more fully.
Yeah.
To experience his grace and his power in ways we never could have imagined.
Wow, so much to think about.
There is.
Seeking God's kingdom, depending on his power, living for his glory.
It's a journey.
It's not always easy.
No, it's not.
But it's a journey worth taking.
It is.
It's about aligning our lives with God's purposes and experiencing the fullness of his blessings.
Yes.
In every area of our lives.
And remember, we don't have to take this journey alone.
That's so important.
We have God's Spirit within us, guiding us, comforting us, empowering us every step of the way.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've been encouraged and challenged to consider how you can invite God more fully into every aspect of your life. Until next time, keep diving deep.